You'll probably find that today's lesson and today's homework is something that you'll recognize because estimation is something we've always done in our lives. And the rules for estimating are really no different. You're still looking at the next number. If it's a 5 or bigger, you're going to round up. If it's a 4 or less, you're going to round down. So that's all the same. What we want to do, though, is show you one of the things that our math series does that you might not recognize. Now, let's say that we are going to round the number 368. We're going to round that to the nearest hundred. Okay, so one of the things that your child has done in class is they've made what we call a place value drawing. And so the first thing we tell them to do when we have a number like 368 is we ask them to write down the 100 that is above and the 100 that is below. For example, we're saying that for 368, well, 400 is above it and 300 is below it. So this is what they were doing in class. So they wrote that down. So now we know we're either going to go up to 400 or we're going to go down to 300. And so our job is to figure out, is 368 closer to 400 or closer to 300? So the next thing we do is we draw the place values of this. And I know that sometimes we feel like these drawings are kind of silly, but kids don't always have a visual of what these numbers mean. And by continually drawing them out over and over again, we're trying to instill an understanding of numbers. And, to be honest, when we look at test scores, we don't test that great in number sense, which is understanding numbers. So one of the reasons we do this is because we're not doing a good job with it. And so this is supposed to help us get these kids to really have a fundamental understanding of numbers. And where on the number line is 368? Where is 368 compared to 400 and compared to 300? And by drawing it out, it gives kids something to think about and something to look at and something to talk about. So these drawings are not a waste of time. They're actually a huge help. And so if you're helping your child and they're not understanding how to do this, one thing you could do is have them draw out the place value drawing. And so let me show you what that is. Okay, so just off to the side, we have three parts to our picture. One is that anytime you have a unit, you're going to do a dot. So if I want to show the number 2, I'd put 2 dots. Okay, then you have, if you want to show a 10, you put a line, because the idea is if I put 10 dots together they would make a line. So a line stands for 10 dots. So if I want to show the number 20, I would put 2 lines because I would have 2 groups of 10, which makes a line. And if I want to show 100, I put a square, because the idea is if I put 10 lines together, it would make a square. Now in class, we have things called base 10 blocks. And so they've actually worked with these blocks and used them and put them together. And then we moved them on to being able to draw them on paper. So your child have seen this in class, so this is not something new to them. So if you bring up these pictures, they should understand what they mean. If they don't, I highly suggest you write a note to your teacher and have your teacher work with them to understand what they mean compared to the blocks. So if I was to draw 300, I would put 10 squares for 300s. If I was to make the number 400, I'd put 4 squares to make the number 400. And now for the number 368, I need the 3 squares for the 300. For the 60, I need 6 lines. And what we're going to do is we're going to put 5 together. And we're not going to cross it. We're still going to put it straight up and down. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I have a 6th one, and so it kind of like it starts its own little separate thing, just so that we have a better visual of how many we have. So we know if it's grouped together, it's 5. Separate ones are otherwise. And then I have my dots, and I'm going to put 5 dots, just like the lines. I'm going to group them up into 5. And so I've got 5, but I need 8 more. So then I'm going to put 3 more underneath. So if I get so that they fill up a whole nother line of 5, then I know I should have made a line instead of the dots. So this is 368. And so now we need to have the conversation of, is 368 closer to 400 or to 300? And so there's a couple ways they could look at this. One thing that people look at, or that kids will say, is if you have more than 5 sticks, so we have more than 5 sticks, right? Because here's the 5. We have more than that, then that means it's closer to the one above. And that's just like what we're used to. We're used to looking at this number right here and saying if that's more than 5, then it's up. then it rounds up. And so we're just getting them to say, well, I have more than 5 here. I have more than 5, so it's going to round up. Okay? If we had less than 5, then we'd be rounding down. So this is just the picture part of what you already know. Okay? Another thing that students might do in class, or that your child might do, is they might say, well, halfway between 400 and 300 is the number 350. And this number right here is 350, and I have more than that, so that means it's bigger than halfway, so that means it needs to go up to the next one. And then what we ask the students to do is to draw this arrow saying we're going to round it up to 400. So those are two different ways you can look at it. In a way, they're not different, but they are. Okay, so one way is to say, well, look at how many sticks there are. If there's more than 5, then we round up. And the other one is figure out what halfway is. If it's above halfway, we round up. If it's below halfway, we round down. All right, so that is a kind of a long talk about how you can draw a picture to talk about rounding. And those are basically the two ways that they talked about it. They use secret code cards, but that's really not anything that you need to worry about because you're not going to be asked to do that at home. The other thing that we want to look at is how we use estimation. And as you know in life, you can estimate all the time to see, how can you figure out what your bill is going to be in the grocery store, things like that. And they should have talked about all those different reasons you would estimate. So they're also going to be asked to estimate for adding and subtracting. And so it's just a matter of now taking what they know and what they've done before and rounding. So we can take 404 and round that down to 400. And we can take 115 and round that down to 100. So 404 minus 115 should be about 300. Now, we need to be able to do that not just because we want to kind of figure out what a sum or a difference is while we're standing there without a calculator or paper, but also because when you use a calculator, you should have an idea if your answer is even close to the right answer or not. And I know that sounds silly, but really I've had students where, the problem was to take 12 times 12 and they wrote down 4 as their answer. And when I questioned them on why would you write down 4, that's not even close to what it should be, they said, well, that's what my calculator told me, so I trusted it. And when I asked them to show me on their calculator 12 times 12, they did, and their calculator definitely said 4. And we found out that the screen on the calculator is broken and only the last digit was showing. But that just goes to show that you can't just trust what the calculator says. You need to have an idea of what your answer should be. 12 times 12 should be somewhere around 100 because 10 times 10 is 100 and 12s are bigger than 10s. So we should be able to do that, and we don't want to just trust things because a calculator told us. So estimation is a really important thing. You should also get with your homework today your family letter. And this is a really good thing just to read through and try and understand. And if you don't understand something, contact your teacher and find out what it means, because this family letter is actually a lot of good information explaining why we do things. And I know sometimes that's our frustration. Why are we doing things? And hopefully this answers questions for you. But then if it doesn't, ask your teacher, because we do things for a reason. It's not just to be frustrating. It's to really get students to understand what they're doing and not just take things for face value.